evening to you, because we have to thank you for staying awake to do this interview for us in America. So thank you, and welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you for having me. A very good morning to you too.
Do you believe that the ideals that led to the formation of the OAU in 1963 still actually exist?
Yes, they do. But sadly, the dreams of our Pan-African fathers are yet to be realized.
And that's, that's obviously still the issues that not the OAU, but the AU now grapple with. And let's perhaps put it in perspective, because you look at young people and we try and appeal to them to look at Africa Day and look at the meaning and the significance of a day like this. What would you say it is? I mean, what is the message that you would give out on this Africa Day?
On this Africa Day, I would like every African to remember that we are still very much part of an agenda that was set out by the colonizers during the Berlin Conference in 1884. Our Pan-African fathers in 1963, realizing that Africa cannot survive, Africa cannot become the superpower that it once was, Africa cannot take her rightful place on the world stage unless Africa speaks with one voice. So in 1963, our Pan-African fathers, they came together precisely to accomplish the building of an Africa that spoke with one voice, the building of an Africa that would go to the world stage as one superpower. But sadly, in 1963, they went to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, divided. We had the Casablanca group, who were the Pan-Africanists, who said Africa for the Africans, African Union now. But sadly, they were the minority. The majority were the Monrovia group, who were the nationalists, who said, let's go slow. So for 56 years, Africa has been going slow up until 2018, when our African leaders were able to finally come up with the decision, which we are now calling the African Continental Free Trade Area. We are hoping with its implementation in January of 2020, Africa can see her way into an Africa that is speaking with one voice. We are looking forward to January of 2020. It
is, and I know one of the stories that we are running in our news bulletin is the ideals of what was hoping. This was going to be, it still is a very big year for the African continent and, for many developments that are planned to take place this year. However, with the COVID-19 pandemic that has now, befallen the entire globe, Africa also having a lot to deal with at this time, and the importance that COVID-19 is going to play on meeting some of those goals. What do you think that the effect of this pandemic is going to have on us?
Well, we're looking at a situation where if we were to maintain the numbers as they are without increased deaths, increased numbers of infections, we may not be able to reach pandemic levels of COVID at this time. However, we are cautiously watching and hoping that the preventive and containment measures that the heads of states have put in place can help us avoid the pandemic. COVID is an equalizer, however. Let's look at COVID for what COVID is. It is an opportunity for us as Africans to look from inside and understand African issues, African problems, and the fact that we need African solutions. I am very encouraged by the innovations that are coming out of Africa. I am very encouraged by the manufacturing sector that has stepped up. We're seeing more and more countries manufacturing their own PPEs. We're seeing young people coming up with inventions where we are now manufacturing our own ventilators. So the hope is Africa can emerge out of COVID-19 with an improved manufacturing sector, with an improved mindset of an Africa that realizes that in actuality, Africa we can take care of ourselves if only we can get out of the agenda of the colonial master and chart our own forward and realize that Africa can take care of ourselves which we can. COVID-19 is going to be a turning point for Africa.
Yeah, it certainly is, if not for the entire globe as we know it. I want to talk a little bit about some personal issues for you right now, considering your own dismissal as AU ambassador to the US for what we believe was your criticism of the West for still having neo-colonialism policies. What is your opinion regarding an online petition by Africans to have you reinstated into that position?
Well, actually, I never intended to be reinstated. This was the wish of the diaspora. They were very clear and understood that I had no intentions. What I came to Washington to do, I felt I had accomplished that mission, but the diaspora wanted to be heard. It's just like what's going on now. There's another petition that came out last week where they're saying I should run. I should be the next chair of the African Union, along with Professor Lumumba. This was the third petition. The first two, I had to beg those people to take them down. This third one, Professor and I, we talked about it, and we decided the voices of the people must be heard. As for the reasons why my contract may have been terminated, I can say this for a fact. I was sent to Washington, D.C. to represent 1.27 billion people. That I did. When I came to Washington, I thought I had left my medical doctor hat back in Tennessee, but I found myself making the same diagnosis on a different level this time. And I found out that there were serious issues that needed to be addressed, but for whatever reason, those issues were not being addressed. The most significant one being the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization, where it was quite appalling to realize the percentage of the people that I met who had never even heard about it. The diaspora were very upset about corruption in Africa, and it looks like the conversation began with corruption and it ended with corruption. So I went on through a process of trying to explain to the diaspora that $50 billion, according to the watchdogs, corruption watchdogs, comes out of Africa due to corruption. However, over 500 billion came out of Africa by France, basically bullying the African leaders to deposit their bank reserves with France. So I wondered why there was such an outcry over 50 billion coming out of the entire continent, but total ignorance of 500 billion coming out of the continent going to little bitty France. So it was a serious problem of simply not understanding Africa's real problems. So I set out to represent, and in my trying to understand why was it that this particular issue that was so pivotal to the development of Africa, that was so pivotal to peace and security on the continent, was not being highlighted and given the platform that it needed. And then I later found out that also a lot of leaders who had attempted to undo this pact, a total of almost 22 heads of states, they were assassinated simply because they brought this issue to light and they wanted to pull their countries away from this pact and also stop depositing their bank reserves with France. So I felt that I was given a platform to represent, and it would be amiss of me to have the platform and still be aware of these atrocities being meted against the Africans and say nothing about it. I did not need a job. I'm a medical doctor. I was doing very well where I came from. This was not a job for me. When I made my mind to stay in Washington, D.C., I made up my mind to represent the 1.27 billion people on the continent and the 250 million African diaspora in the Americas. I was determined to do that no matter what the consequences were, and that's what I did.
Would you accept a position if they say that you can come back?
Absolutely not. My job was done. I think I've moved on, and I will continue to speak out to the injustices against Africa. I'll continue to speak out against the abuses and exploitation of our continent, and I'll continue to speak out and defend and protect the millions of women and children who are dying every day from disease and starvation unnecessarily. I'll continue to speak out to the millions of youth who are unemployed today, and I'll continue to speak out to the abuses from the multinationals who are coming into Africa, using safe havens to avoid paying taxes on the continent, undergoing illegal mining, illegal fishing, all kinds of atrocities being committed by outside forces. I will continue to speak to that until the continent is free of exploitation.
Thank you for talking to us here on the program and sharing your views with us on both Africa Day and the situation that you're currently facing right now. Dr Arikana Chihombori-Quao, the former AU ambassador to the US, for talking to us on this Africa Day.